pleased to welcome you to this latest installment of our ongoing webinar series for the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities, or better known as USU. And as you've probably noted from both the title and from other USU materials, this webinar is part of our efforts to recognize and celebrate 20 years that we have been formed as a coalition. And there certainly have been some iterations of USU prior to that, but the current form, the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities, started 20 years ago. And in a turn of good luck, 15 years ago, another milestone year, USU became part in permanent partnership with APLU and started serving as their Office of Urban Initiatives. And so we're really celebrating 2 anniversaries. And to honor these milestones, we're pleased to welcome 4 important architects of USU, both as an organization, but I would actually argue honestly about urban serving universities as a movement, as really a formation and an element within the higher education landscape, both philosophically and as an institutional type. These panelists have all served in the role of being a board chair for USU over the years, and we're pleased to hear from them over the next hour in their reflections upon our history, as well as discussing how what our history is and where we are now serves as a foundation for a future of ongoing advocacy and impact on behalf of public urban serving research universities. When your work is more than just an organization, really does garner sort of a movement and a sea change in the way people look at higher education issues and institutions, it really isn't about any one moment in time. It is about an ongoing effort. And so this is an important snapshot in time and one that will inform where we head from here. Before we get started, I did want to note that this webinar is being recorded for both the current participants as well as future individuals who will review it on the USU web YouTube channel, and on it will be linked in various social media outlets. And I'm going to cue now my colleague, Alex Blumenthal, to drop in the chat some resources that you may want to dig deeper into with respect to USU's history and activities. In there, you will find a 4-page document related to our history, just to give you a better sense of where we came from and how, the timeline of that evolution. We also recently invited our member presidents to submit videos discussing the USU's anniversary and their role in it and what being an urban serving university means. And we were overwhelmed and completely humbled by the responses. And we were grateful to be able to put those together into a video that is currently on our YouTube and website, celebrating USU and our anniversary and looking ahead, again, much like the themes of this webinar. We also thank you to President Garnett Stokes. During her time as a board chair, she gave a State of the Coalition address at the USU summer meeting that touched upon the key elements of our anniversary, and we turned that into a blog post. We have an ongoing blog if you would like to look at other entries, but that one is the one we're highlighting. And then lastly, just to give you a sense, for those of you who are less familiar of USU activities, we've posted a link to our annual report from last year. So all those are available in the chat. Thank you, Alex, so much for posting them. He is our APLU associate for USU, and we're thrilled to have him be here and making the magic happen behind the scenes. Now, that is enough of me taking the valuable time away from these incredible panelists. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and I'm going to ask them, it really is a disservice for me not to introduce them because these are people I respect immensely, and they have accomplished so much on behalf of USU and urban serving research universities. But I'm going to leave it to them to give a brief introduction of who they are, where they currently serve, and their previous role in USU, including the term that they were a board chair. And I'm going to go alphabetically because it seems as good of a way to organize this as any other. So I'm going to start with President Michael Amaritis.
Well, good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I'm in the 4th year as president of the University of South Carolina after 7 years as chancellor of the University of Illinois at Chicago. I'm a member of the board of USU for 11 years now. Thank you, Mark. And I was the chair of the board during the 22nd, 23rd year.
Thank you. And I'll hand it over now to Mark Becker, who apparently was just, I don't know if it was blamed or attributed for your ongoing participation, Michael, but I'm going to hand it over to you, Mark, now.
Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer. Mark Becker, I'm was formerly president of Georgia State University from January 2009 to August 2021, and then president of APLU from September 2022 to the end of June 2025. And in both of those roles, obviously interacted with USU. And I think I may be the only person on this call who served on the board of USU with all the other panelists on this call. But
Yeah.
was engaged as I can't say exactly what my term on the board was, Jennifer, because I think I was on the board almost the entire time I was at Georgia State. There kept being a reason not to roll me off, which is I think it was I don't know if that was a reward or a punishment, but it was a wonderful time.
Well, we're going to think of it as a reward.
Okay.
And I think that you have the unique experience of sort of 360 view of USU in the sense that you were at a USU member institution, you were on the board, and then obviously, as the president of APLU, oversaw the work that we were doing and saw it within the fit of APLU writ large. So that's an exciting perspective I look forward to drawing from. Next, President Garnet Stokes.
Good morning, good afternoon. I am Garnet Stokes, and I'm currently the president of the University of New Mexico, serving nearly 8 years. In the very near future, it'll be an 8-year anniversary. I can't remember exactly what my start date was with the board for USU, but I think I've largely been on the board since I became a president at University of New Mexico. I was the incoming chair, I think, in 23, 24, and then served as chair in 24, 25. It's been a great experience.
Thank you. And as we were just saying before, with last name with the letter Z, Nancy, last but not least, please go ahead and introduce yourself and your role within USU's history, which is deep and important.
Well, I think long is the word. And I remember spending many years at Ohio State when they decided to hold hands and cross the street and look at the community that surrounded them, which was very compelling for me. I took that interest to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where we itemized the Wisconsin idea to become for Milwaukee the Milwaukee idea, and moved from there to Cincinnati, where the reporter said, I suppose we're going to have the Cincinnati idea, as if we use a cookie cutter to figure out what our vision and our mission is. But our mission turned out to be replicating the best of urban based universities as our clarion call. I would have to say, when I moved on to the State University system of New York, the emphasis seemed to shift to regionalization. So I wasn't as active statewide as I had been in the urban cities, but I did champion the leadership of the university at Albany as the primary party, although Buffalo and the University of Buffalo and all the campuses were near cities, and it was really important. And I have landed today as president of the National Association of Higher Education Systems. Again, not so much regionally as a mission committed to the cities as much as the states, but through that long tenure of 30 years or so, it was always my passion that cities get the attention they deserve.
Well, thank you. I want to move now to a set of questions, and there will be room for those of you in the audience for you to submit your questions via the Q&A function of this webinar. So I invite you to do so throughout, and we will get to those at the end. But as a facilitator, I get to ask the first few questions of the group, and I'm going to start with this idea of, we posted the history document, but it's more about stories, really. History is about stories, if you ask any historian. And I want to hear from you, anything about unsung heroes, surprises along the way, important or forgotten milestones. And the bottom line is, if you could just share some of those bigger critical moments in the arc of these 20 years, that would be wonderful. And if you were writing the memoir of USU, what would you feel had to be included? And I'd love to start with you, Nancy, because I feel like I believe you were the first, if not one of the first, chairs of the board of USU in its current iteration. And so you were there for the inception, its transition from its previous point to its current point. And so I'd love to start with you to talk about that.
Well, thank you. I wanted also, Jennifer, to thank you for your leadership. I know we all appreciate what you do every day for USU, and Garnet for your leadership. Doesn't happen without the board chair in consultation with the executive director. So it really matters a lot. And I guess I would start with Peter McPherson. I think. I have no chronological memory of my own career, let alone what was happening in the world. So I think I was board chair of Nostalgic when Peter started this mission to integrate the urban agenda with the agenda so obviously represented by our land grant status. And he was tireless. He would not be deferred. It took forever to hire the president because we were new and nobody quite understood what we were talking about and where it would find itself in the architecture of AP, what was then Nostalgic, but APLU. And finally, he just said, I'm going to do this. And a week later, he had a president. I mean, I wasn't even offended because we were struggling with how to get this new organization wedged into APLU. And there was no real resistance, but I would say there wasn't a mountain of urgency either. So that is a milestone, and how he did it and why he did it. I think in part to balance the heavy weight of the agricultural interests of the land grant and to say cities matter. And when you have a problem in a city, you really don't call the county agent. But everybody knows to do that in a rural county in Appalachia. So he wanted that presence in the agenda of APLU. So we can come back to that, but he'd be my hero. And Mark, of all people, knows that the influence of the leader of that organization and the dogged pursuit of recognition of whatever the topic is a 24-hour obligation. So for your role, Mark, and for Peter's role, I want to celebrate that. Um, and secondly, I want to celebrate the legislative period of USU. What I think made it work, even though we did not get I think Urban Renaissance, the Urban Renaissance Act never really came into law. But the fact that we were modeling it after EPSCoR and the research funding that came to institutions were not in the privileged category was a worthy mission, and it really helped that we had a legislative model that we could follow. That's where Joe Danick came in. That's where Van Scoyoc as a consultant came in. And it gave us a purpose beyond our own wish that we were better heard and represented. It helped to actively be legislative. We spent a lot of money on our advocacy for that bill, and it's still the right idea, and we can come back to that. But those are two, Michael, that I think of that were quite memorable and high level and go big or go home.
Well, thank you. What you said about balancing the land grant mission with the urban viewpoint reminds me of a quote that Mark Becker would often say, which is, if we had a moral act in this day and age, it would be, probably going to butcher this, Mark, so please correct me, but it would be focused on the urban areas, not necessarily the rural areas, in terms of workforce development and meeting the social and economic needs of society today. So you can correct me on that, Mark, if I butchered any sort of general quotation of your sentiment.
Well, I don't think there's
Well,
an exact quote, but that is the sentiment, is that, when AP when well when what became APLU started, it was the 1800s. We were a very different country than we are today.
Well, I
Well, there was
appreciate that.
something else going on that's really important to our history, and that is the work of Bruce Katz with the Brookings Institution and the work of Richard Florida on the creative class. I had to go look this up this morning because I couldn't place it in our chronology, but it was right alongside Peter's momentum. And it was a great time to think cities.
Right. There's
Well, the
often
other piece I would say is just to give Peter credit. You got to remember, not that Peter was the champion, no doubt, Nancy, and we all benefited from APLU embracing USU, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But just remember, Peter grew up on a farm and was president of land grant, so he gets extra points for for having that big vision, that big picture, that did not reflect his background, but reflect his understanding of what APLU needed, what our public research universities needed as part of their agenda.
Totally
Well,
agree.
and I appreciate the origin story. That is a big piece and the most critical milestone in some ways. But I know there have been other milestones along the way that have created momentum or have created challenges that USU has galvanized around. And I know, Michael, you often talk about several of those in the arc of our history. And I wonder if you could also talk about some milestones and stories and unsung heroes that you've seen over the years.
Well, I'll give you a couple of examples, right? One of the surprises that I found when I moved to Chicago, and there were a few, always you find some, you have some surprises. It was a college that I was not familiar with in my previous experience in academia. They called it the Kappa, and the Kappa was CUPPA, College of Urban Planning and Public Affairs. A college focusing on the quality of urban life and as a result, addressing a variety of issues, housing, transportation, economic development, but also education, government finance, and much more as well. Uh, a college which was also preparing the administrators, not only for the municipality of Chicago, but also the surrounding suburbs and the counties that they are around there. And the dean was Mike Pagano at that time. And I also met the first dean of that college, who was Wim Wiewel, who was the first, who was at the time, was the president of Portland State. I also found out that similar colleges existed in other urban serving universities, and they're all very strong nationally recognized programs. The City University of New York, Rutgers, Central Florida, SUNY Albany, all of them are members of USU. And I'm sure I'm missing a few as well. I'm not an expert in this area. So when we're talking about unsung heroes, I would like to remind to everyone the faculty and the leadership of these colleges and departments. These are the people who understand our cities and they are changing them for the better, and they have been doing it for decades now. I was also in Chicago during the spring of 2020. And like all of us, I will never forget the challenges that we faced during COVID. The urban serving universities faced more challenges than other institutions because of the density of population that we have surrounding us and our campuses and the public transportation that many of our students and employees were using. I'm very proud of how quickly we got together as a group, and I'm sure that Mark and Garnet also remember this. And we started having weekly meetings, working together and learning from each other about many different issues. How do we protect? How do we test? How do you vaccinate? Online courses, graduations, admissions, and the list goes on and on and on. But what was left with me, what was clear to me during that period, was that we are really a great alliance and we work very well together. And this should be part of our history as well.
Thank you. The power of a network is really incredible. And there is a unique experience of being the president of an urban serving university. There are certain specific challenges, and this is a network of folks who understand that, where you all can speak shorthand. And in a moment of crisis like COVID, that's even more critical. I appreciate the both of you and or the three of you talking. I want to shift a little bit more specifically to the idea of accomplishment. So, what are the achievements that USU has met, and what are we most proud of as a network? And each of you has a different viewpoint, but I'm going to go ahead and start with Garnett. Would you mind starting and talking about some specific accomplishments or achievements that stand out for you? And you think you said you're 11 years in on the board, is that correct? Or your decade of time with USU?
Whatever that time is. It's been a number of years, but it's really interesting to think about what's been accomplished because I hear some of the things that have already been said today, and I think of the history and the success over time, the evolution of this coalition as one of the big accomplishments. The fact that we're where we are. On I guess on the shoulders of people that really got us to this point. And so to me, that is, a very important accomplishment that we are, in fact, where we are, the sheer scope of what we do, the fact that our institutions are major contributors to research, I think over $8 billion, that we serve so many students. over 1.2 million as a coalition that we are made up of over 240 or nearly 240,000 faculty. Um, I think another accomplishment, sometimes these things are not as easy to quantify, but the fact that when I look at our institutions and realize the commitment that exists among them to serve our students and to serve our communities and to serve as anchors in those communities, um, to me, that is an accomplishment of USU. Um, Kind of a little different, perhaps, but the work that has been done to bring in grants and to can gain philanthropic support for that has provided resources for our institutions and has provided technical assistance. It's allowed us to drive innovation and success for all of our students. So I think the work that's been done over time there is something to tout and to be proud of. I know for the University of New Mexico, participation in the student experience projects has really changed much of what we do with students. And what I loved about the student experience project was that it was focused on research-based practices that allowed us to create environments for students that it allowed them to attain their degrees more readily, and it helped build these equitable classroom environments and university environments that really served our student population very, very well. And the expansion of that to include training of graduate teaching assistants, to me, that's something to be proud of. But I think probably the last thing I want to mention is kind of where we were with the last question with Michael. The 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 way in which USU has provided an avenue for the leaders to get together. It's not weekly anymore like it was in COVID, but that was the beginning of a true partnership and an ability to get together and talk confidentially about what we're facing, and share our successes and our challenges. To me, that has made a world of difference for me as a university president. And in that sense, it serves our entire institution and our entire coalition that we are able to find these ways to work together collaboratively.
Thank you to both you and Michael for highlighting those meetings. In some ways, I feel like that's the beginning of that movement, right? That we're able to talk about this. USU is kind of a way of thinking, a philosophy, an approach, and a type of institution. Mark, I want to come over to you.
If I may just jump for half a minute, right?
Sure.
We kind of liked each other. There was no big egos. You don't see what you see in some other institutions that they believe that they are changing the world and everything. We worked extremely well together. That was a big win for all of us.
Yes, thank you for playing nice in the sandbox. As the person who leads the organization on the administrative level, I really appreciate that. But yes, you all are wonderful people and incredibly supportive of one another, and they share that vision and philosophy and goal. Mark, sorry, go ahead. I keep on trying to give it to Mark, but everybody else wants to get 2 cents, which I love. This is the best kind of.
Somehow the internet is not my friend today, but nonetheless, I think the in-person gatherings, we went to people's cities. We saw them in action. I don't know if you get to do much of that anymore, but it quite quickly personalizes what people are talking about. The other thing, which I apologize if it sounds negative, but while we're all busy acting like we're RR1s and still counting how we fare in U.S. News and World Report, which is an anathema to me, this agenda did give us something unique to talk about and defined us in a way that we were holding ourselves accountable. I like to think that it did influence in some ways the Carnegie classification, that we had this community outreach, and they are, I think, trying to add more people to the halo of RR1. But I think the halo of community development is much more responsible for what we're there to do. And somehow I think more than anything else, USU epitomized that. It's about doing, it's about changing. And the rankings are fine, but they don't hit on any of that.
Well, the ranking that I
That's
most
right.
often quote from US News and World Report is the fact that USU member institutions share the top spot and overwhelmingly on the top 10, representing the top 10 of institutions that influence social mobility on the national level. That is really, I think, illustrative of what you're talking about here, Nancy.
Absolutely.
Mark, in your 360 view, again, as a member, as a board chair,
Right.
and then also as a president of APLU, what are some of the accomplishments and achievements of APLU that you are most proud of from the years?
So I'm actually going to resonate with what Garnett and Nancy and Michael have all said. So I don't have anything that's truly uniquely different. But I would start off by saying that I think USU's biggest accomplishment, and it starts with the Urban 13 and ends up where we are today, was creating an authentic identity, an identity that presidents and their institutions could resonate to, and one that is national in scope. It's not regional, it's not geographic, it's not tied to an athletic conference like so much of university identities are these days. But it's an authentic identity about purpose and mission. And so I think that is a huge accomplishment. Um, I would say that the sustained partnerships, Michael talked about, we like each other. Well, these institutions have all gone through leadership transitions. My predecessor at Georgia State had been active with the predecessor of the of USU, the preceding organization. UIC, is an example of an institution. Portland State is an institution. CU Denver is an institution. These are all institutions where, while I was involved with the USU for 16 years in different capacities, presidents and chancellors came and went, but the institution stayed engaged. And that means the organization is providing value. And so I think that was tremendous. That's a tremendous accomplishment. I mean, USU, nobody has to pay the dues. Nobody has to be a member. It's elective. And the very fact that it's had staying power through leadership transitions. I think, in terms of historically, just growing from what was essentially an eastern half of the country organization with 13 institutions to one that's now coast to coast with more than 40. So it's tripled in size and it's gone coast to coast. But you go look back at the original map and one of the documents you shared, the Urban 13, was pretty much east of the Mississippi, not maybe a little bit around the Mississippi, but not a whole lot west of the Mississippi. And then, Nancy, I think, touched on it, the grants, getting the grants. And I think the other piece, the big accomplishment for USU, and it needs to be said, is we've hired great executive directors. Sherry Garmise was an outstanding hire, carried the organization through a lot of growth and change. And then the hiring of Jennifer Cloyd was also a tremendous step forward for the organization. So I think it is an accomplishment to hire great people, because without great people, nothing gets done.
Ditto. Well said.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you. That was a surprising and humbling, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm honored to be here and work with this organization to continue and build upon those accomplishments and add to them. I think some of you have touched upon this, but I want to give you all a bit more of a chance to, we joke around, I often use the shorthand of like the special sauce. Like, what made USU successful over the years? We've talked about these accomplishments, these milestones. What are the qualities that allowed us to do that as an organization? And how do those qualities remain part of our culture, and how have they evolved over time? And Nancy, I'm going to put this to you because I think, again, you have that history piece. What was it that made us so good to begin with, and how have we been able to continue that?
Well, I think part of it is kind of institutional pride. Once you start something, you certainly don't want it to die on your watch. I was also the chairman of the board of CEOs for Cities. Michael, that was really Mayor Daley and a gentleman from Paul Grogan from the Boston Foundation, a very unique and unusual partnership. But nonetheless, it came, it went, it saw, it did, it died. So I think remarkably, sustainability is the issue. And probably, Mark, in the embrace of a board and an organization, that was the big stabilizing factor. We were no longer on our own, but managed to attach ourselves to a nationally influential home. And that home has made us, not a bunch of mavericks who were right, but not belong to a family, to an organization that owned us, promoted us, made board policy around us. And we all know that things come and go and agendas die. Sometimes I'm beginning to think that the culprit, when boards do not understand sustainability, all the things that Mark Becker stood for, when you left, Michael, when you left UIC, what your experience, Garnet, has been to sustain the agenda, boards have to buy in. And this national affiliation helped us as presidents and chancellors be recognized and legitimized to our own boards to sustain the agenda. And when I left Milwaukee, we had this Milwaukee idea, but it did not last because the priority became the research agenda. And I think it was hard to find a way to mobilize the research agenda around the urban environment, which would have been a perfect way to enhance the research capabilities of the institution. So I sort of become a student of sustainability, and I think that's a bit of what we've got here, a lot of what we've got here.
Thanks. I often say, like, as a leader of organizations like this one, you have the responsibility of being responsive to the needs of your current constituents and members, but also looking down the road 5 to 10 years and charting a path there for the group. So I think that was one of the reasons this is a great fit and a philosophy that has been true to USU as part of that sustainability of being able to drive the conversation as well as respond to the immediate need. So I appreciate you validating that, Nancy. Mark, go ahead.
Point. In 2003, Mike Bayer at ACE was in that time running sort of a publishing committee or organization within ACE. I'm sure still is. I've lost track, but he allowed us to compile a book of stories of presidential leadership in the urban environment. I think maybe because it was done by ACE and not necessarily by APLU, wasn't any competition. And you take the first person that says, if you want to write this book, we'll publish it. And you go, okay, if it doesn't violate my morality somehow, let's do it. And so we focused on 12 university leaders to tell the story of what it meant to lead an urban university. Because I think the linchpin to sustainability, we all know, is leadership. To the degree you can document the personal sacrifices, the innovative thinking, the creativity, the willingness to join a group and not always be the only shining star, does need to be recognized and recorded for history. And I will say more later, but I think building a literature on urban leadership should be a going forward task. And the literature builds it, you know that. It's got to be on record. Articles, opinion pieces, books is a fine idea, fine way to do that. And it came out just as I was joining the University of Cincinnati. So that bookstore had to buy it. They had to act like they had read it, you know.
Love it. Great timing. Mark, I would love to hear from you about what has made USU successful over the years that you can identify and how those qualities have been our pillars as well as how they've evolved over time.
Well, it's really a segue on what Nancy was just talking about and what we talked about in our accomplishments is this authentic community that where the leaders of these institutions identify it's a community that's of value to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be engaged. And the organization wouldn't have grown as it has and continues to grow. I would say that in my own case, I became the president of an urban serving institution, And when I accepted the job at Georgia State, it was certainly with the intention of building on its location in the city of Atlanta in that case, and being in the place, of the place, for the place, as in terms of its students, its research, its scholarship, its engagement. And I think that's what USU gives to all the presidents who become presidents of a USU. Many of us don't come from USUs. I got my PhD from a land grant, had served at flagships and land grants, had never been employed or worked or been educated at a USU specifically, but immediately recognized, as I set out to create an agenda, a vision, a mission, refining the mission of Georgia State. USU gave me a natural landing place. And I think all of us who have come into the role, particularly from the outside, see that as a unique location and opportunity. It didn't keep us from our other engagements with the APLUs, the ACEs, our athletic conferences, our state boards, our state systems, and all those other things. But it was unique for us at our urban serving institutions. And for those who have come from that ecosystem, they already have that community, and so they're already engaged and embedded. So I think the secret sauce is it goes back to that authentic identity, and you get presidents of these institutions, not always, but certainly enough to sustain the power and the momentum, who really care about the fact that as a president of an urban serving institution, you're not just a generic institution of higher education. You're something different, and different is good in this case.
I really, really resonate with that, Mark. I remember when I was called about the urban serving universities when I became president at UNM. What I said was, what I had been thinking for years, which is there is something special about being president at an urban serving university, and I had not really had that opportunity before. I came out of a small college environment, then a land grant, and I love land grant universities. But what I knew is that there were so many challenges in the urban environments. And I was excited to become a president of a university that was in an urban environment with everything that comes with that, but also to have this group and be part of it, something I didn't feel like I was qualified to do at my other institutions. So I really appreciate what you said.
Thank you all for the insight. I think that I want to shift now to where we're sitting at this moment in history. And I thought that we left the word unprecedented in the COVID era, and we have brought it back. So I think we are living in unprecedented times. And I'm curious, how do you see USU's role in today's challenges? So how do urban serving research universities contribute to addressing today's political, social, economic, and educational challenges? And maybe if you have the purview to also comment on how that role has changed over time. Michael, I'd like to start with you. So how do you see USU's showing up in addressing today's challenges, particularly at this moment in history?
Well, I'm going to go a little bit back, right? Because I remember also pretty much everybody mentioned the Morrill Act of 1862, which played a crucial role in expanding access to higher education for rural and working class individuals. And in the process, made a significant progress in improving the quality of life, right? The record of the urban serving universities clearly shows that we have focused on expanding access to higher education for today's working class students. And at the same time, and you can see this, if you look at our Pell Grant, for example, for all of our institutions, it shows that this is what we are doing. And at the same time, we have been focusing on improving the quality of urban life, which is very important for our cities, right? The urban issues are changing over time, but our commitment remains. We were talking just a few minutes ago about initiatives, right? The initiative that they had at another institution, and initiatives come and go. The mission is the key issue. What is the mission, and does it remain the same? And that's the case with our commitment. We know that the millennials generation showed strong interest in living, learning, and playing in urban environments. But we also know that after COVID, we saw a tendency to move to the suburbs. But they're still near the big cities, and the percentages of the people that moved is not very large. We're talking about a few percentage points. We don't know what the Gen Z generation is going to do. But the bottom line is that the big cities will continue to have the majority of the population in the country, give or take a few percentage points. There were always going to be new problems in our cities, whether they're political, whether they're social or economic. I never believe that we will live in a situation that we will not have problems. We will always have problems, and we will always will have difficult problems to deal with. However, we have some very smart people in our universities who will find the solutions. Don't expect the presidents to find the solutions. Our brains are actually, problematic after being in administration for so long. But I think that the urban serving universities will continue to do what we have done for 20 years as an alliance and for many more decades as individual institutions before the alliance. Through education and through our research, we will continue to improve the quality of urban life because this is our academic DNA and because this is what we do very well as universities. And I think that today's problems will continue to be tomorrow's problems and in different shapes, but always we will have answers for them because of the history that we have and because of the background that we have in our faculty members.
Thank you for that insight. I want to also include the perspective of the other current sitting president on this panel, Garnett. Like, what do you see as the role of urban serving research universities in addressing the political, social, economic, academic challenges of today?
Well, I think that's what USU actually represents. We lean into the challenges and the opportunities that exist in our urban environments. We don't separate our student success from community success. We recognize that we are transforming our areas, whole regions with the work that we do. And that's true no matter how politicized the higher education environment gets. We are fortunate in many ways as urban serving universities that our institutions reflect our populations, and we are able to continue doing our work and even ramp up that work, recognizing that we aren't serving our communities and we're not really contributing to the success of our communities unless we continue that work and even double down on it. I think about, the desire as a public institution in an urban environment to actually serve the citizens of our state and certainly the areas that surround us. I think leaning into that commitment as institutions in USU is demanded of us, being public about our commitment to it. What's interesting to me as I think about the history of what I know about cities and I look at our current environments, I realize that some of the problems that exist in our urban environments are very, very difficult. And when I think about the various perspectives about how those challenges should be managed, they have been, in many ways, fully politicized. And we as institutions, with our faculty, as Michael has mentioned, we've got incredible people that work. They can help, deal with that gap between different perspectives about what solutions are really going to have an impact. And so, I think as Michael said, these problems are going to continue, and we will continue to debate the best strategies. But universities and USU's institutions are in a place to continue to help solve these problems and intervene with facts and what the research shows and what our practice and experiences show about what can be most effective. And the answers are complex, which is why, we will continue to be working on many of these problems.
Thank you. Mark and Nancy, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on this question as well of what you see USU's role in addressing today's challenges, socially, economically, academically, politically.
Well,
I wanted to say around the future that you are kind of known by who you associate with. And when I said, and I didn't, I must mostly want to be lighthearted about it. I can't remember a urban problem that I have faced where I called the county agent. I've never been in a city convening where the county agent was sitting there. But that would be an anomaly to the rural county I grew up in, where they knew their families, where they were at the same dinner table, where they helped solve problems together. That is a vision of urban outreach that I think could be a model for us. I think we should be the not the, but a go-to organization in solving a city problem. In Cincinnati, it was an area that had become extremely crime-ridden. We were on the board of the revitalization. They couldn't have done it without some of the societal and architectural issues we brought to the table. So, one measure of our success is if we are a part of the go to organizations, and that's real. You have to be at the table to play. And I do think that we're still a little aloof, a little afraid of the politics. Uh, don't want to come to night meetings that go until midnight because nobody knows how to slam the gavel. Those are torturous meetings, but that's how communities roll. So, in this case, given that we know the problems are going to persist, are they calling us? Does the mayor know we're an urban serving university? These are hard questions to ask and to answer, but the proof is in that. That's where we live. And I think we are a bit internal about these problems and solutions that could be a marker for success in the future.
Yeah, I think Jennifer, I would only add to it is, and this is going to more show my age than anything, is just stick to the basics. You're young, you see these as unprecedented times. I'm old, I see this as another turbulent period of which we've been through many. 5 years before I was born, the United States deposed the leadership in Iran and instituted a Shah who was then overthrown by Islamic fundamentalists who took Americans hostage, who we tried to rescue, and it failed miserably. And there's a long litany of U.S. interventions attempted in Cuba, Nicaragua, Panama, etc. We've seen this stuff before. The specifics are different, but we're not seeing things we haven't seen before in the arc of the history of the country, but in the lifetimes of individuals, it's unprecedented. At the end of the day, we should always stick to the fundamentals that are our mission. In baseball, the former Baltimore Orioles manager Earl Weaver said, "Great pitching and three-run homers wins games." In football, you win the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. You'll be able to run the ball. You can run the ball, then you can pass the ball, and you can score more points than the other team. For us, it's done a great job of educating our students, which unique, as I think Michael alluded to earlier, is we're dealing with a unique population of students that's incredibly important to the future of this country and need us to be successful. So we got to stay focused on that, stay focused on our research, including our research that is unique to understanding and trying to come up with solutions or parts of solutions to the issues that our cities, our urban areas face. And as long as we stay focused on those fundamentals, the USU will continue to provide value and will continue to be helpful in these cities, these communities, and overall for the good of our country and moving us forward. But it's going to be messy. There's going to be some periods are going to be more turbulent than others. Some periods are going to be quieter than others. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be a role for our urban serving universities. And the mission will only become more important because we're not going, as Michael alluded to in COVID, some people moved to the suburbs, remote work went on, became a thing. But the cities are going to continue to be where most of the American people and most of the economic activity happens.
And I think if I can add one more thing, we need to understand what the general public believes and what they expect from us. As a former president of APLU said to me a few years ago, was that we want to be understood, but we don't want to understand what others are doing, right? And that's critical in this environment, is to understand what the general public wants as well.
Great.
And I think being an urban serving university, as I think Garnett said, but all of you have alluded to, you're situated uniquely to be able to get that feedback very directly from your constituents. I want to ask all of you, I want to give you each a chance, maybe sort of not quite a lightning round, but maybe a minute each to discuss. We're celebrating 20 years, right? Our goal is to use this as a foundation for 20, 40, 60 more great years. If you're looking ahead, and we're sitting celebrating our 40th anniversary 20 years from now and sitting in a similar webinar, what do you hope we'll be discussing about USU's role and impact over the next 20 years? What do you think that we can either continue or embark upon that will be the significant element of the conversation in 20 years when we're celebrating 40 years from now? I'm going to go back to alphabetical order. So, Michael, I'm going to call upon you first. Looking ahead, what are you hoping we'll be talking about then?
I'll tell you what I hope is that 20 years from now, another panel will be discussing how our universities led the transition, because we are in a transition period right now, into the AI era and use these new tools wisely. I think that's the biggest problem that I think we have. And if we manage this, and being a group of universities that they're willing to make changes and lead the transition, that would be great.
Wonderful. Mark, you're up next.
Yeah, I'll become slightly granular, but certainly agree with what Michael said, which is, we talked about accomplishments, milestones, et cetera. There's certain issues that vex our cities, have vexed our cities for a long time: housing and homelessness, crime, transportation. I would hope that 20, 30, 40 years from now, we will have made significant progress, if we're not eliminating, at least improvement on all those, and that USUs will have been key partners in that process, because we can't do it alone, but we can certainly be important partners.
Yeah.
Thank you. Garnett, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just, I absolutely resonate with that. I want to think back to something that Nancy said earlier in talking about the future, and I couldn't agree more. Are we the ones they come to? So 20 years from now, we see progress on some of these intractable problems that exist in our urban environments, and they actually, and in many cases, they're really problems in our rural environments too. So we end up having some real impact beyond even the urban environments. But I think that there is no question in 20 years, we're not talking about whether or not we really are the go-tos. We are. And in fact, we're figuring out together all the most effective ways that we have worked and led within our communities. And it's not even a question. People know that, in fact, we have helped create major change in our regional areas.
Thanks. Nancy, what would you like us talking about in 20 more years?
Well, this is the problem of being the Z. All the stuff has already been said. So now stuff. So anyway, two things. I would call this an inside outside or internal external way to think about our future. Internally, do understand we need a literature on our work. That is how you get prominence and you get rewarded. And I would highly try to cultivate the small community of something like 300 or 400 institutions that are vying for the honor of classification for attending to our communities and our outreach. Why isn't that, if we have 4,000 universities, why isn't that a highly sought after and led by distinction that academics seek for their work? So one is getting in the literature, which also gives you prominence, for better or worse. And second, to have a standard of excellence that is external to us, saying this is who we are. And I think we could see that in 10 to 20 years really blossom. You have to have particulars. You can't just be up in the clouds all the time. It's visionary, but what exactly are we going to do to make that point? And then externally, and I'm just taking a page from my work with systems. If we should ever reauthorize the Higher Education Act, the word system is not in law. When you wonder why you're always climbing to get somewhere, think about the fact that you aren't even in law. So, is there something civically important, something that the state should acknowledge? If we have a Department of Urban Affairs, are we leading it? Are we counted as being there? Because I think we all know that we have to live by the legislative political framework to be recognized, which is why this Urban Renaissance Act was so important. We didn't make it, but you never make it on the first run, even if the first run lasts 20 years. We ought to have a big goal, a big go get them or go home, go big or go home. And I think we will be known by some of those accomplishments that are very strategic and realized. And to set those goals now means we have to revisit them every year in our 5-year convenings, our 10-year convenings, our 20-year convenings. Be explicit about the mountain you're climbing, and then be able to say, hopefully someday, we did that as a collective goal.
I'm excited. I have quite the to-do list for us to work on together. This is wonderful. I want to honor that we have a question in the chat, and I know we're a little limited on time, but I'd love to hear from you all. The attendee asked, thank you all so much for your insights. I'm interested in your perspectives on building stronger partnerships within our cities. Where do you begin, and who are the right, quote unquote, people to broker those partnerships? And in parentheses, they offer mayor, city manager, university president, someone else. And how do these relationships help the university become the go-to organization to support those complex challenges? So you all talked about being the person, being the place that people go. Who are the key partners to help you do that in that urban ecosystem?
I'll say for me personally, it was twofold. It was certainly the mayor and the mayor's office. Worked with 3 different mayors during that time. But also it was the Chamber of Commerce, because the Chamber of Commerce is where the business is where you meet all the leaders of the businesses, small and large, everything from Fortune 500, Fortune 100, down to literally startups that have only been in business a few years. And so that's how you get the connection to understand what really drives that city, because without an economy, the city isn't going to survive. And so I think it's a twofold approach: is both being politically engaged, engaging with your chamber or whatever the appropriate organization, and then there will be no shortage of not-for-profit entities that you'll become engaged with. The challenge you'll face is there are way more of them than you could ever engage with productively, and some of them could be counterproductive, if not damaging to you. So it's part of learning the skill of who to say yes to, who to say no to, who to give time to, who not to give time to.
Thank you. Garnet, Michael, Nancy, any additions that you'd like to offer in response to this question?
Well, close to what Mark just said, I think he's textbook for a really changing, significant case published in the Stanford Social Innovation Review in 2011 on collective impact. It's textbook what Mark just said, but it won't happen if you're not careful that you stay tuned to the theory of collective impact when you talk about the application of collective impact. But we are scholars, we do like to read and to see how a certain theory of action plays out. And what Mark did in Atlanta measures up to that framework. And I think it's important we have a framework for our action and that it's theoretically based.
Thank you. Michael and Garnett, who are on your speed dial? Who are the folks that you connect with to be able to be the go-to organization in an urban ecosystem?
I think you need to have at least a couple of people in the university that this is their job, right? The connection, with the city hall or with the organizations that they're, 501c3s, churches, if you are in the South, right? There's very strong institutions there. So you need to have a couple of people that they do that, and even more. It depends on how big is the city and how big is the university. And I think don't expect the president to do this work alone, because then you're not going to do anything else. I think these connections and knowing these people and they're the go-to people when there is a problem that we can help makes a big difference.
Thank you.
It
Garnet,
really
I want to give you the
depends.
final word.
Yeah, I just want to say it really depends on, what it is you're working on, what the challenges are. So there are key people, and I think they've all been named. And and I think I agree that having someone who's the point person internally turns out to be really important, because one of the greatest challenges that I hear about is we don't know how to get into the university. We need some place to go, and I think that's really, really critical to creating the right partnerships.
Well, I know, Michael, you said the president can't be the only one, but I know that all of you in your role as presidents of USU institutions have been that champion. And I want to thank you for your work at those institutions and on behalf of USU and for your time today. This has been wonderful. I wish you all well, and I thank you and the participants for being engaged in this particular webinar. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
You.
Thank you.